Was supposed to be your MC host this afternoon, but he was unable to join us. So I am taking his place. So, it is my honor to introduce Lee Majors, Richard Anderson, and Lindsay Wagner. So let's get it right. It should be live.
Live, but not up. Can you hear me?
No. It's on. You just got to move closer. Closer. Well, welcome to the Bionic reunion. We did have a video. Unfortunately, because of the time and moving in of the people, we were not able to play it, but you can go to YouTube, and it was created by Betsy Dodd, and it's entitled A Bionic Reunion. And it gives us a recap of Jamie and Steve coming together, being bionic, and living happily ever after. So, this is the question and answer session. What we'd like you to do, if you have a question, is to stand up, say it, I will repeat it back to who it is addressed to, and then we will have a conversation. All right? So, first question? Yes?
I was wondering how long you actually had to run, even though they showed it in slow motion. So how many times and what kind of distance did you have to run?
So how many takes did you have to do in order to show the running in slow motion?
Depends on the shot, on the circumstance. Sometimes we had to run long distances, and other times it was really short, but it looked long to you.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. I ran my butt off. There was, I remember one scene on a runway at Edwards Air Force Base on a hot sunny day that they had me running through the length of this building to the end at full sprint. And of course, by the time I went by camera, they say cut, they'd say the focus puller, the focus man on the camera said, I missed the focus. And after about 7 of those, I said, guys, I only have one more. So you better get it this time or you're not going to get it. They got it. Next question? So you have something to add to that?
Actually, now that you start talking about that, I have memories coming back. I think I suppressed them all. I actually passed out once when we were out in Saugus, the Saugus Newhall area. We were working with Max, I remember. They kept saying, you know, you've been drinking enough water, you've been drinking enough. Yeah, I have both. I was out after the 3rd run. But that's all of the worst one I can remember.
And the funniest part is when you see me running, especially in the 70s, with the bell-bottom pants on, flapping in the breeze, and catching on all the branches and trying to stay cool, you know.
Nancy or Lindsay?
What?
Turn up the mic.
Yes, please. Yeah, my mic is pretty low. Can you turn me up one more?
Folks, this system was not designed to reach all the way to the back of the room, so you're just going to have to listen carefully. If we've got it maxed out any more than this, you're going to have feedback.
Yes, young lady.
Hi. I just want to see. Test it, 1, 2, 1, 2. You did get it up a little farther there. Good for you.
Testing, testing, testing.
We still have questions.
It was like this on the set, too.
Hi.
Poor Faith.
I just want to thank you all for coming out. You all look great. I volunteer at a radio and TV museum. My question is, if you had one piece of work, each of you, that you would put in the museum and say, hey, this represents me. You could do it off of your most popular work, and unsung work, and old work, and new work. What would you put in a museum that said, hey, this represents me?
So what would you choose for your most representative work?
Are you talking about as far as the performance is concerned?
Right, movie, TV, radio, what have you.
Performance, though, because there's lots of different reasons that I would pick this and that and
Well,
that.
Can you hear her in the back?
Wait, was that a yes or a no? Yes. Down. Some up, some down.
Well, whatever's personal to you, professional, whatever you would choose, your own view.
Richard, do you want to answer that?
I want to go play tennis.
So Richard, which would you choose as your most representative work? What would you choose as your most representative work that you would like to be remembered by?
What was your favorite thing you did? Your performance, what'd you like the best?
Performance? I don't perform.
I think you meant that.
I listen. I try to say something that might make sense. Very seldom. But I'm grateful
You mean
to be
on
here.
screen?
I'm very grateful being here.
I was very happy with my performance, I think, which was really hard, in the taking of Flight 847, the movie I did. It was a hijack film. And that was a tough shoot, and it was a very emotional, tough piece, and I had to learn about a quarter of the film in German in 2 weeks. I learned all that in 2 weeks, so that was... And then I actually had somebody who come up and say, oh, la la, start talking to me in German. It was like, oh. And they said, well, you were, and I said, no, yeah, but it's all gone. All I remember is, the funny thing was, all I remembered about a month later was, wir haben nicht genug Treibstoff, um nach Algier zu fliegen, which means we don't have enough fuel to get to Algiers, and I haven't really had an opportunity to use that since.
I think that, looking back, I think my first audition, which was a scene from The Big Valley, was... It was more of a thing that I felt from inside because I was adopted as a young kid and so forth. And so I felt that character very much. And so that scene in the pilot of The Big Valley was very, very emotional for me. And then I would say the last thing I just did was a movie called Do You Believe, which had some powerful scenes in it. And so, and then all the little ones in between.
Right here.
Yes.
Working with Andre the Giant.
Andre the Giant, a very big man, 7'4" and 400. And I just remember being in the woods one day and having him come and pick me up and throw me about 20 feet. Then run and take a flying leap and was going to land on me, and I saw the sun disappear and I thought I was going to get crushed. And he never touched me. He was a wrestler, a professional wrestler, and that obviously they're very good. He was a very gentle man. He owned a restaurant in France, and he was French, and then he loved to cook, and he was just a very gentle giant.
Yes, sir.
Like I tell you, that Bigfoot suit smelled horrible.
Yes, sir.
For Lee, your first fight against the $7 million man was pretty brutal, in my opinion. Did it take a physical toll on you, and how much of it did it take on you?
Well, I wish that was the only fight that I did in my career. on film. But yeah, that one, I remember they took all day to film the fight scene, and it went on forever, I thought. And yeah, today, everybody has knee problems, but I have one a little more than most of you. The running and jumping and stunt work, and all the westerns and cowboy stuff I did, which was all great fun. Because when you're young, you're invincible, you think, and you can do all that stuff. And I look back and wish I'd have used my stuntman more.
I would ask Lee and Richard, were you horsemen when you got your Western role? Richard, you were in so
Were you a horseman when you got your Western roles? Were you a horseman?
Horseman.
When did you ride horses when you got your Western role before?
The Rifleman is a show you were in frequently, and you sat a horse great, and you were good with the gun. Where did you learn to ride horses?
Where did you learn to ride horses? And when did you learn to ride horses?
I had to be on a horse on the first job at Republic Studios. Republic Studios were the lowest in all of the thing. I got at MGM and I got two other ones later, but there was nothing like this. So I promised that I know how to ride a horse. So I went over to a stable. And I got a stable, and I asked this fellow if he'd give me a job to get on, and I half got on. And then I went back, and I got on the horse, and I stood up straight, and I then almost fell over. But I got up again, and I turned to the horse and gave him a kiss.
Well, on the Big Valley, when I went in for the interview, they said, "Can you ride?" I said, "Like the wind." But no, I had only done some pleasure riding, but I did say yes. And immediately after, like Richard does and all actors do, you get your behind out there and you learn quickly. Otherwise, you don't last in the business. If you want to do westerns, and back in those days, in the 60s, there was nothing on television generally but cowboys and Indians, and so and that's what I grew up with, watching all the good guys in the white hats and the bad guys in the black hats. Today it's a little different, but I miss seeing all those old westerns, and there's some great ones out there. Thank you.
Yes.
So, Ms. Wagner, of all the co-stars, other than these two gentlemen, we keep you out of that, of all the co-stars you've had, the gentlemen, which one was your favorite in your movies?
So Lindsay, who's your favorite co-star other than who's up here?
What magazine do you
Before
work for?
$6 million man.
Work with some really nice people.
You stumped her.
Yeah.
Lie.
Actually, the problem is my memory. I can't think of their name. It's not too
Learn the lyrics and don't bump into the furniture.
Michael Nouri and I did a film called, what the heck was the name of that film? Shattered Dreams. Yeah.
Shattered Dreams.
And it was a very tough film about domestic violence. And, you know, so it was a very uncomfortable film to film. And he was just such a gentleman, and it made, you know, it was a very nice working relationship when you're doing something very painful like that together. And he was a jewel. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
The gentleman in the navy blue shirt.
I wanted to know what input, if any, you had in the character's development, and if you contributed, how did you, like, what way?
So did you have input into the character development, and if so, how did you do that?
Who are you asking?
All three of you. So Lee, you want to start us off?
I had actually a lot because it was difficult. You know, we were a mid-season replacement for one thing. We were also doing something that had never been done before, and that was having a woman in a position, a real position of power, not just political power or some kind of authority, but physical power. And so now we're dealing with kind of classical espionage type story. Good guy, bad guy, good guy wins. And typically those formulas are all about physical prowess. And the good guy usually wins, but most of the time it's because he's stronger, and thank God, because he's the good guy. And so I basically said, look, we can't we can't write all the stories as if it was a male, you know, so I don't want to be a man in a skirt with the typical kind of thinking and approach. And so we worked very hard to bring some other kind of a look, a more, almost, if you will, if you could kind of relate it to martial arts, it was more of an Aikido type approach rather than a karate approach. You know, whereas a woman would think automatically, because she didn't grow up like that, it was just a thing that happened to her. So she was still thinking and feeling like a woman. And so to put those two things together was the things I was giving them feedback on. I just think this is too pat. For a woman, I don't think instinctively would respond like that. There would be a different kind of response. There'd be compassion, where typically a man would just say, okay, enough of this. You know, a woman would have to and go through some more emotional stuff about it, because it's not like she grew up being from another planet, you know, or grew up as a tough gal. So we had a lot of balancing to do, and they were very collaborative, and I enjoyed that process very much.
Lee?
Oh, well, I think in every series I've done, or all the things that do most actors bring their own persona, their own thoughts and things to the character. It's just a natural thing you have to do, the study and the work. That's about it. I can't think of it.
Okay.
I'll tell you one real quick while they're talking, is that I do remember when I was sent the script for the $6 Million Man. It was called Cyborg, and it was about a man who runs 60 miles an hour and jumps tall buildings. And at that time, Batman and Robin was the camp show on Hit Show, and it was a very campy show. And when I read it, I didn't think it would. I wanted to do it because of that. If they were going to make it camp. And so that was the biggest influence on the $6 Million Man, is I wanted to be a human, even though he had parts, but to make it a human that people could really relate to.
Richard? I was here to save the United States. This fellow over here, I hired him because he was an athletic person and was very good at it. And after a year of that, it proved that it was a way you talk to him that changes him. And then suddenly it got the idea that why should it always be a man? Let's get a woman. And what I learned about this was that when I asked them to go out and do something to save the Union or to do the right thing, that I'd have to talk to them in a different way, you see. And when I'd see her, I'd have to say it to her in a way that she would do it in the simplest way possible. But with the man, that was very different. At some point, though, one day, I think our third year or so, or not my second year, whatever it was, it's been a long time ago. I said, let's get a lady in this show. Let's get her in, and in doing that, I did, as I said, made certain that whatever was said in a way that would be the best of coming back well, happy, and ready for the next week.
Stand up, please.
Two Bionics. In real life, if you could choose one of your bionic enhancements, what would you choose and why?
Lady, please.
I thought that was a
In life, he's my best friend. I just wrote it down when his wife came and asked him that I just a book was written and she wanted to hear it, and then I looked and I said that he's the best friend I've ever had.
Thank you, Richard. I still think he would be one of my knees right now. I didn't say which one.
The young lady in the pink.
Wait.
Lindsay. I loved the Bionic cover after 1989, but I would like to ask why, when Jamie had supposed to die and then died, I don't think she could recall just how close the relationship was to Steve. So why was there no romance kind of that type of thing?
So I think what you're asking
One more time without the accent, please.
is why do you think the relationship survived?
No, why was the relationship, why was it not rekindled once Jamie came back to life?
Okay, let me see if I think I understand the question. Why did they not have our relationship come together after I came back to life? Because then they'd only have one series.
And one episode. Yes, sir.
This is for either of you. The best director that you ever worked for, and the most difficult, not the worst director that you worked for, but the most difficult that you worked for. Okay.
Robert Wise was the best director I ever worked with. He was just amazing. It was a movie called Two People, and it was a wonderful way to enter the industry. It was my first feature film. It actually went on the shelf 2 weeks after it came out because it was so politically charged, and it was just before the POWs came home, and we were talking about this young man who had been a deserter, and people just went, they went crazy on the subject matter. So, but Robert was just the quintessence. He was not only huge, he was the Spielberg, for those of you who are too young to remember, of the previous generation. And he was just the most humble, kind, gentle man, talked to every member of the crew the same as he talked to the stars. He was just such a role model. I'm very blessed to work with him right off the bat. And I don't talk about things that are negative. Maybe private.
I don't remember, I mean, most all the directors were wonderful directors, and even if they were a little tough, you always learn to work around that and come up with your way of still doing what he wanted, but maybe in your own way. One of the most difficult directors was not because he was difficult, it was because it was William Wyler, who did some wonderful, wonderful films, won many Academy Awards, and I did a film called The Liberation of L.B. Jones with Lee J. Cobb, Barbara Hershey, and Mr. Wyler. It was his last film, and he was sitting in his director's chair with a little thing in his ear that was connected to the boom where he could hear the dialogue, and Lee J. Cobb and I would come in off camera and come into the office and do a whole scene, which was very long. Mr. Wyler also suffered very serious emphysema, and his wheezing was so loud that it was almost distracting, especially it was to us, and I'm sure the sound guy was going nuts. But after, and he would he would listen to a few takes, and then you'd see him take the earpiece out and put it in a little box on his chair, which meant he wasn't listening to you, so you knew it wasn't going to print that one. But he would never say cut. He would just keep going, and so we would keep going and take. After about 17 takes, he would finally say, print 3, 11, 14, and that's it. Never without any direction after each take. He would never say a word other than, let's do it again. So that was very difficult. I always remember that, but he was a marvelous man.
Richard shared with me Alfred Hitchcock looked at some of his work and contributed comments to his acting, correct?
Alfred Hitchcock, he was the one, British. Yeah. And it was all actors, you know, he understood it. And I went up to his house up in Beverly Hills, and at the want of people that he wants to have around after he's worked with them and considered that they were good people. And so he called me in, and I said, Mr. Hitchcock, it's nice to see you again, work again. He says, thank you very much, my boy. Let us go now. Let us get in the cars. Let's go over to the theater and tell this story about these things that I think are very interesting. But the people they don't know out of anything. Alfred Hitchcock.
All right, the gentleman in the red.
How do you like having the real Bionics helping people, like with FedEx or with the war, the actual Bionics?
That actual Bionics came to be. How do you feel about that today and how it's helping people?
You know, they were actually even working on it then. I can remember early people contacting us or me, and I'm sure they contacted you too, but saying, would you like to come to our facility and see what we're doing? And they were very primitive at the time, but you knew it was on its way. Hardly anybody knew about it then, but I mean, they weren't very effective, but they were already working on it. Yeah.
Okay, the gentleman, gray hair, with his hand up. Yep, that's, yeah, yep. The gentleman in black.
Two-part question. Mr. Majors, I saw the movie, Do You Believe, and I enjoyed it very much. How did you get involved with that?
What's the second part?
The second part is with Miss Wagner.
Oh, okay. No, I got a call from the people who were doing the film, Pureflex, and they've been doing a lot of faith-based movies, and I've done a few of them myself. In fact, I'd already done a couple for them before, so naturally they called upon me. I read the script. It was a wonderful script, wonderful part. I enjoyed every minute of it. And I hope everybody gets to see it. It's out on DVD, and it's called Do You Believe?
And the second part?
The second part is Miss Wagner, we talked about this before. John Houseman, who worked with the Paper Chase and works in the TV series. I asked him, what was the funniest thing he did that you could remember?
When I met John Houseman, James Bridges, our director of Paper Chase, took me over to me. He said, oh, John's here, come meet him, you're gonna love him. I walked over, and for those of you who know, it was quite grand and very, and he walks me over and says, John, I'd like you to meet your daughter, Lindsay Wagner. Lindsay, this is your father, John Houseman. And he looks at me, he looks me all the way down and all the way back up, sticks his hand out and says, my dear, incest overwhelms me.
Young lady, yeah, Mike.
show of your series that you are working with lions. How was that? I mean, or you were not really close to them? I'm assuming they were tamed, but how was that?
I do remember an episode with some lions, and I do remember that at lunchtime everybody was running to their trailers and climbing trees because one of them got loose. True story. Everybody was a little spooked, and they got the wranglers out there, and they finally herded him back in, but it was kind of scary for a while. Sometimes, you know, we do have to get close to these animals, and I remember one with some mountain lions that I had to have, you know, around, and very close. I mean, I'm touching them and stuff, but you don't know. They have their own instincts, and you don't never know when something will happen. But you do what you do, and hope that they, you know, it's like you kiss the horse, and I'd kiss the cat.
Well, I was working with Neil the lion, and he was pretty old, and they wanted him to, and of course the trainers, they always say, oh, just hand signals, that's all we need is hand signals. Well, they tried to get him to turn because the character was coming that he was supposed to go, oh, my trainer, my human mom is here, and the lion could care less. He just sat there, and so the trainer over there is going, Neil, Neil, Neil. He kept screaming at this lion, and the lion's just sitting there looking the other direction, and we're sitting next to him, and finally he said, Neil, you turkey, and the lion went, oh, that's all I had to say.
Okay, the gentleman in the plaid.
Question for Richard. Memories of working with Kubrick?
Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
Memories of working with Stanley Kubrick.
Nothing at all.
All right, the gentleman in black.
This is for Lindsay. I really enjoyed the Me and Lee pilot that you did. I thought it was hilarious. Can you tell us anything about the origins of that?
What you want to know about it? I'm sorry.
The origins. What were the origins for that?
There was a friend that I happened to know that wrote it and pitched it. He was a writer, one of the head writers of Weeds, and I had done a few shows on the Weeds series, and he came up with it, and the network liked it, so they filmed it, and I think it was Lionsgate, and it was on the schedule for a little bit, and then it got bumped at the end, so who knows. Shows, they make so many shows a year, hundreds, and there's only so many hours on the television, so some make it, some don't.
Yes.
I was wondering for the two Bionic stuff, is there a movie that someone had proposed to you to play in, and somehow or other either it didn't get made, or maybe they have picked someone else, but you would have really liked to be part of that to maybe make a difference? Or...
So is there a part that you would have liked to have had, but you didn't get?
Well, I'll throw a quick one in. Is that when I first started, there was a part that I had gotten because the ABC had canceled The Big Valley, and I was free to do it, and it was meeting with the director, producer, and writer, and with my agency, and we were in the middle of the contract negotiations, and then ABC decided to pick up The Big Valley for another year. So they went to New York, and they cast a newcomer there, and that was Midnight Cowboy, and the actor was John Voight.
Do you remember the movie 1776? Yeah. I was hired and in rehearsals to play Martha Jefferson and sing the violin song and whatever. And I got, 2 weeks into rehearsal, I got a little bit of a cold, and we weren't filming for another several weeks, but for some reason they just got cold feet, because when I get a cold I lose my voice, but it usually only goes for a couple of days and then I'm fine. It's just kind of a pattern that I do. But because I lost my voice there for a day or so, they panicked and they replaced me. I was heartbroken, yeah.
Gentleman with a hat.
Comment and question. I'm glad after all the complaints and the relationships that you had, that you two finally got together in the end.
Jeez, I thought he was talking about me.
You have pictures?
Why so
Question?
Yeah, why so many different Rudy Wells?
I want to tell a better story. We would shoot away from the town, and at this place called Indian Valley, and it was up high out of town, and this gentleman was working there, and I was called to come in later. So as I got there, I saw a big high bit of iron, you know, going very high, and it was just, and it had a place at the bottom of it where you can get off. And I get there, and there he was. He was just as high as you could get, because I saw this fellow, who I couldn't tell who it was right away, going way up, and then going all the way down as fast as he could. And he landed on the porch, and I realized it was this guy doing that. And I said, "Are you crazy? You're gonna get the end of the whole business if this goes on like this." And he said to me, whatever he said, he says, "Oh, it's really very nice." He goes up again. This guy goes up again. And then finally, somebody comes along that had called the studio, and the head of the studio, I'm not kidding, came along and got us off that of that. And then we had a scene where we had to go into a plane. Well, that was the other one. We got in the plane. He was flying the plane. And all of a sudden, he's very low, and he had a moment, and he had flowers in his hand by this time. He does a lot of things in the last moment. And I said, "Where are you going?" He says, "Well, I just something that I have to do." And he went down there, and he took the flowers, and he knocked them over a horse, not a horse, you should have. He let it go right down of the house of where he was living, and he was just very happy about it. And then, of course, the thing we were in was going down with it, as it usually did. And then we came back, and then when we came back, they were ready to fire us all. I'm telling you, it was just incredible by this fellow. He just dropped the flowers right down on the house where he was living, and the lady came out and just waved.
So why were there 3 different Rudys?
He wants to ask you a question.
No, I'm asking you.
No, ask him. He knows.
Okay, so why were there 3 different Rudys? Malton Balsam, Alan Oppenheimer, and Marty Brooks.
Why did they change the Rudy character after?
Actor.
I have no idea.
I don't know either, but I assume Richard might have known, because he did most of the work with them. If you understand the show, he was doing most of the scenes with those guys. So I have no idea. Well, I can tell you the pilot was who was
Martin
Balsam. And they also had Darren McGavin, though, in there also.
Right.
And of course, Mr. Anderson replaced Darren McGavin, and Martin Balsam was replaced by somebody. But anyway, Oppenheimer. But well, Marty Balsam was a New York-based actor at the time, I think, and I don't think he wanted to do the series anyway. So I think they knew they had to replace him. So, and then as far as they changed it again, I just don't think he worked out. I don't know if he was strong enough or the character they liked enough. So they changed it again, because if you don't fit the part and it's not working, maybe chemistry-wise or whatever, that does happen in a lot of shows.
Gentleman in the navy shirt.
Hi, thanks for coming, all of you. This is for Lee. So in the late 60s, Sean Connery said, "I am so sick and tired of playing James Bond, I don't want to play him ever again." Did you ever feel that way when you were doing the $6 Million Man? Maybe toward the end, did you think, wow, I wish this would stop, I wish it could get out of contract?
No, not on the 6 mil, even though I did get very tired at times and burned out. But every time Richard would go and put one of these movies together, he was the main culprit of it going on forever, as far as...
No one ever believed me.
Richard, I've known Richard a while. I've worked with him, and the very first time I met him, from then on, I called him Old Money. Only because he just looked so cool and classy all the time, and he still was different. But we finished the series, and then Richard toiled around and talked him into doing another movie, which we did, and then years later, he'd come knocking again, say, "I got another one, would you do it?" I said, "Okay." In fact, I'll let Lindsay tell you the middle one. There was 3. I'll just tell you the last one was our wedding. I said, "No." I said, "Richard, are we going to do one more where there's a divorce, or we're in the old age?" Lindsay can tell you about a young actress that nobody knew of that was on our middle show in about 1994 or 89 or something. I'll turn that to you.
89.
Oh, yeah, Sandra Bullock. She was delightful. She was very young and very green, and it was just so wonderful to work with this young lady, and we were all kind of hoping that this was going to be the spin-off, and we were going to do little visits occasionally on the show, and working with her, she was funny. She was totally green, missed her mark a lot. And actually I remember doing a scene with her one time where when you're doing an over-the-shoulder, what they call an over-the-shoulder, where the camera's shooting over me, but it's actually, say, on Lee, and it's his kind of close-up, but it's with a little bit of you in it, you have to be very still. You have to be very, you have to not even shift your weight from one foot to the other, because all of a sudden you're completely covering them on camera. And so, you know, young actors don't always necessarily know that. And so she kind of shifted her weight, and after you've done a series, you can do anything. You can save any shot, just about, unless you totally forget your lines. And in this case, because you can just sense it. There's a sixth sense about where the camera is, where you are in the scene. And by this time, of course, I'd done magnitude of it. And she did this one thing, and it was late at night. I was tired, I wanted to go, and I started, and she shifted her weight right in my over the shoulder, and I did not want to do it again. And so I just kind of leaned over. And I kept talking, and so she saw me lean over, so she leaned over. And so I leaned over some more. And by the time we finished this scene, I was kind of almost 45 degrees. And when the director, because I was determined not to have to cut and do it again, and the director said, "Cut, print," and the whole crew just cracked up. And she kind of looked around, like, what's going on? What's so funny? You know, and the cameraman especially, who was following me, he was like, "That was awesome." But she was a delight, and then of course we were all excited, is this going to work? And then the studio said the most amazing words. the studio, because we were all into it, but the studio said, yeah, we don't think we're going to do it with her because we don't think she can carry a series. Are you kidding? And we were trying to fight it, and they said, no, no. Well, I was proud. The rest is history. Huh? What?
Sandra Bullock.
You know I was talking about Sandra Bullock, right? Yeah. Okay, good.
Would you guys be open to appearing in the new Bionic reboot film? Would you guys be open to appearing in the new Bionic, the $7 Billion Man reboot? With Mark
It's a $6 billion man by Martin Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Mark Wahlberg is doing it, and the Weinstein brothers. So, no, we haven't. There's not even a script yet. So who knows what happens there?
In the opening, when this lady came on with us, they had her playing tennis, right? And she didn't play tennis.
But I looked amazing. You know how they were talking about how you get your job? Sure, I can ride a horse. Are you kidding? And you go off to leave the interview and you go straight to the stables like they did to learn to ride a horse. Well, I did the same thing with tennis. When they said, when I decided, okay, I'll do the show, they said, you play tennis, right? And I said, of course. Never had one in my hand. I went and same thing. I went and found a coach really fast. And they said, well, how, I said, no, I need to learn this fast. I said, I don't care where the balls go. I just need to look good. And so we worked on form, and that's all we did. And I did this form. So the day that we were shooting this scene, which was where I think it was the one where the ball goes through the fence.
It was the first job on the shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard, who's an amazing tennis player and plays in tournaments all over the world, he came to the set, and it was kind of our early connection, meeting and whatnot. And he goes, God, you play such good tennis, because he was watching me, but he wasn't paying attention to where the balls were going. And he goes, listen, you come play partners with me somewhere. And I went, oh no, you don't want that. No. And then as he stood there watching me, he went, oh yeah.
I think Richard was in love.
Young lady with her hand up.
I wanted to know if each one of you had a favorite episode, and if so, what is it and why?
Your favorite episode and why?
I really get back to the tennis. I did get up around her, and immediately she started, doing it right. And then early on in the series, very early on, she would come out and ask me, am I doing right by this, and how are things going? And I want to tell you, this lady's amazing. She just did everything with great charm and great fun, and on top of it, she hired someone to come and maybe lie down and get a little bit of this around her. If you're
I hired a masseuse to come on the set for the whole crew, not just for me.
Yeah, that's right. And she had it, and if anyone didn't feel well or something like that, it was true. She'd have that person to come in, and I was there half the time.
Gentleman in the jean shirt.
Thank you all again for being here. Followed all your work, loved it. Do you believe? Great. Real quick, how was it to work with Charlton Heston and Will Penny?
That was probably one of the more better westerns that was made. It was probably, I know, the best work that Chuck Heston ever did. It was a very authentic western. It was my first movie, actually, that I got billing in, and it was a great experience for me. And Chuck was just a wonderful man, and he lived that part, and you could tell And of course, every day we were shooting up in the mountains near Bishop, California, and there was snow on the ground. But every day at lunchtime, even with our chaps on, he'd make us go run a half mile or a mile before we could have lunch. He was also a great tennis player and always in great physical shape. And he did a lot of wonderful movies for us all that we all enjoy.
The other thing that we had when we were on location, which was really something, they have a man, you know about this, pal, where he takes care of throwing things. You know, remember? We had his name all the time. Every time I come around, he was busy with something that he's supposed to take care of, you know. And every time he came, he missed the place that was supposed to go. And it was really, now this is a serious thing, was just absolutely terrible that how many times he came close to really getting taken.
Well, we had a couple of effects guys named Inky and Joe. and there would be sometimes when I'm to run through this field that had landmines in it, and there was supposed to be 5 yards between the explosion and me, and I had just gotten my butt past it, and they would set them off. I could feel it on my behind. So you never knew. There was times when the steel doors that I'm supposed to do a flying leap and with both feet crash down the door, and they'd never take the hinges out. There was a lot of stuff like that really kind of hurt your career a little bit.
Lindsay, you have a Joe story, don't you?
Yeah, on our crew we called him Oh Shit Joe. He would do things and then something would go wrong and you'd hear him go, oh shit. And so we were doing what was the name of that episode with the computer? Doomsday is Tomorrow. And there was this scene, again, a landmine. And he probably had 35 charges going down the hill. And I ran it, I was to run it, and Rita, my stunt girl, ran it too, and they had all these charges. Took him at least a half a day, maybe 3/4 of a day to set it up, and we thought we would have it shot by midday. And so the director, and writer, Ken Johnson, and of course our producer, he kept saying, Joe, is it ready, is it ready? Finally, yeah, okay, it's ready. And so we're all standing there looking at this hill, getting ready to film this thing now. And we were going to do it all in one shot with a bunch of cameras. And he said, and so Ken says to Joe, he says, how's this going to work now? And he said, well, I've got 3 guys up there. Each one of them are going to set off a whole set. There's 3 sets of charges. And coming one here, and one here. There's a guy over there kind of behind the bushes on that side. There's another guy over behind the bushes over there who's going to set his off after these guys at least go off a certain point. And there's another guy over here going to do it. And he said, okay, so they all have radios? And he says, no, they don't have radios. And he said, well, how are you going to cue them? And he said, well, I told them just to watch for my hanky and I'm going to wave it like this. Bam, 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 bam. We all just stood there watching all of these explosions go off. And at the very end, of course, the last thing we heard, oh shit.
Gentleman in the light blue striped shirt.
My question is for Lindsay. I mentioned earlier you signed my DVD of Scruples, which is my all-time favorite miniseries of all time. Is there any memory you have from making that miniseries or working with Efrem Zimbalist Jr.?
Well, working with him he was just such a gentleman. He was just a lovely, lovely man. That's my recollection of him. Nothing funny or anecdotal of him. He was just a doll. Boy, that was a, well, that frizz hairdo, first of all. That was like hours. I could have been an Ewok by that time. You know, what time we took to get all those curls in my straight hair. Actually, there was a funny. You know, I'm getting to the point where I'm terrible with names to begin with, but then getting to be this age. the fellow that played my husband, the second husband.
Armando Sande?
No. It was Armando. No, it wasn't Armando Sande. It was another Italian, wonderful, beautiful, huh? Mancuso, Nick Mancuso, very macho, you know, beautiful man. And he was also, he'd just gotten into meditation and yoga and all that kind of stuff. And he's supposed to be playing this hot-headed Italian director. And so there was a time when we were doing the scene and we were supposed to be fighting, and the director, who, by the way, you were asking about directors earlier, Alan Levy was one of my all-time favorite directors for television. He was just delightful. He directed a lot of the Bionics, and I think did he probably...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So he was doing... he kept standing on his head before we would shoot a shot, because he was always trying to stay calm. But in this one scene, we're supposed to be fighting, and the director wasn't just quite getting enough out of him. And finally, I just said, okay, look at, I went to the director and I whispered in his ear, I said, don't cut the camera no matter what happens. Just keep saying action. And so they rolled, and they said, okay, and they said, action. And he started doing the thing, and I just ran over and I grabbed him by the shoulders and I went, ah! And I screamed in his face, and he went like that, and the director said, action, action. And he looked at the director and he said, action. And he went, ah! And he did this great angry scene. And then he said, cut, print, perfect.
I've been signaled here by the man at the end of the table that our time is up, and I just want to let you guys know that we don't get together that much, the three of us.
No, I don't.
And this might be one of our last ones together, and we're glad that you people came and got a chance, because this was maybe the one-in-a-lifetime thing here tonight. So God bless you all.
Thank you for 40 years of Bionics. Please stay at your seats and exit through the doors on the side, and please stay in your seats.
One, two, three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.